But why? You'll see. May my heart be my guiding key.
Hello everyone, Jazzy is back with a Kingdom Hearts theory video. As you see, this is part 2 in my discussion of the huge update, the huge finale to Kingdom Hearts Union Cross. In my previous video, I discussed some of the cutscenes in terms of the Master of Masters discussion with Darkness, talking about the fictional world, the Master of Masters discussion with Luxu, talking about how he's setting up individuals to harbor the 13 darknesses, and of course the cutscene in which we see Brain stay behind while Laurium, Ven, and Arena continue on into the future. Now, picking up where the last video left off, now we're going to get into the nitty gritty, into the cutscenes that caught us all off guard. We already, in my previous video, I already introduced the one cutscene that caught a lot of us off guard in terms of the dandelions becoming dream eaters of dream drop distance. We are introduced to more new characters. We are reintroduced to Scala at Caelum and how that was set up, how that began, and then also a face reveal of a person that has the no name, the gazing eye Keyblade, whatever you want to call it, in the black box. So in that cutscene, I can theorize that we're seeing Luxu, and maybe he did put his heart inside Brain's body. Or this is an older Brain that we're seeing who inherited everything from Luxu. Or you have a situation that this person that we're seeing with Brain's face on Luxu is what Luxu actually really looks like, which is a whole other territory in terms of what is going on with the existence of Brain and who is Luxu originally and why do they look alike. So of course this video will primarily focus on those theories behind this whole situation going on with Luxu and Braig. But before we get to that, let's start at the cutscenes in which we learn the fates of these Kingdom Hearts Union Cross characters. So the first cutscene we're going to discuss is a strange city in which we find that Brain makes it to this strange city, and he is found by a person named Sigurd, who hands Brain his hat. He said he was destined to escape Daybreak Town's destruction and was sent here, and he is the only one that had came to this era this time specifically. We later find out as they're walking to headquarters that they come into, I guess, the city square, in which we see a tall statue of none other than Ephemer, and Sigurd explains how Ephemer founded Scala at Caelum and that he was the first Keyblade master. Now we don't know exactly what era this is in terms of if Ephemer is alive or not. He may be dead by now, he may be much older, or maybe he is still the same age. Be hard to, think about that, but I guess not the same age, just a little bit older, but not like old man. So still not knowing exactly what time this is and if Ephemer is around or not. All we know from this cutscene is that Brain ends up in Scala at Caelum, and that this world may have been set up by the Master of Masters, Ava or Luxu, as he was destined to come here. The next cutscene we have is End of the Line, in which we find out about the fates of the other characters. Now saying that Brain is in Scala at Caelum. We also see the scene where Ephemer ends up in the Sea of Destruction, I'll call it, in terms of the ruined Daybreak Town and its debris floating around, and we see him rise up from the pod. So this is where his origins, of course, begin as being the founder of Scala at Caelum, amid the ruins of Daybreak Town. We see that Lauriam, Elrena, and Ven make it to the future in the normal Kingdom Hearts world as we know it. It seems that Lauriam and Elrena make it to Snow White's world, it seems, with the flower field and the stormy mountain pass. And then, of course, we see Ven end up in the Keyblade graveyard with a black figure approaching him, which is probably Xehanort, because he was the one that found him. I can't think of anybody else that would find Ven and interact with him in that specific place, knowing that Master Xehanort trained Ven to deal with the darkness that was inside him. As we know now, that was originally from his time in the Age of Fairy Tales. We already know that the player, of course, became a new heart, or merged with a new heart that was coming into existence, and that would be Xehanort, so connecting back to him again. So all those four are involved with each other. The player, Lauriam, Elrena, and Ven now, in terms of their connections to Xehanort in that time. And of course, the final Keyblade War that we see at the end of Kingdom Hearts 3. We don't, in this cutscene, see Skuld's fate, which is very interesting. Of course, if you see my previous videos, you'll know that I've always connected Skuld to Subject X, so I'm guessing she was sent to Radiant Garden. But I also wonder that even if when she was sent to Radiant Garden, if she was sent back in time to Scala at Caelum, knowing that she had crossed paths with Braig, aka Luxu, when she was essentially held prisoner, but like as a test subject for Xehanort's, or Terra Xehanort's, I guess I say, but yeah, for Xehanort in that form, his experiments on the heart. And then, of course, last but not least, we have another face reveal coming from Luxu. We see at the end of Kingdom Hearts 3, Luxu reveals his face to be Braig, but of course we learn in this cutscene that that's not originally what he looked like, and we know that he had changed his appearance. He had moved his heart from body to body to follow where the Keyblade will go to up until this point at the end of this current Keyblade War. But now we're seeing another face reveal with a person with the gazing eye Keyblade in the black box. And again, it does seem to be Luxu because it's picking up with a scene that we were shown at the end of Kingdom Hearts Chi back cover. So now seeing the face, which seems to be the original face of Luxu at the Keyblade graveyard, now this opens up the floodgate of theories of trying to figure out why does Luxu look like Brain. And this is what a lot of this video will focus on. So before we get into the theory mode, let's kind of take a step back and go through some of the information we've been presented with in the past in terms of Luxu's situation and what he was going through prior to this next cutscene in which he meets Brain in the real world after Lauriam, Elrena, and Ven venture off into the future, and he's the only one left in the real world while the player Ephemer and Skuld are still stuck in the data world. In this next cutscene, we see that Luxu makes it to the pod room, in which again Brain is the only one that is here. He asks him, he's asking, is he a union leader? Where are the others? And he tells him that two are stuck in the data world. One went to the future and I'm here. So then, of course, Luxu's like, okay, there's supposed to be 5 of you. Did the other one fall? And of course, he had to explain that yes, one of the union leaders was, did fall, was slain. And so Luxu, probes his brain, like, what's your plan? What are you going to do about this, the situation that's occurring? And we see that Brain, his main resolve is to awaken the dandelions in the data Daybreak Town and bring them back and then essentially to save everyone, but he doesn't have a concrete plan of how to do this. So Luxu, being Luxu, reminds Brain that he needs 2 things if he were to use a lifeboat, or, reminding him that the people that are using these lifeboats, they need 2 things in order to be recompleted at their destination that they're sent to. They need a medium to put their heart inside of. They need a medium that's able to put their heart inside of a vessel, and they also need people who remember them. With that said, Luxu appreciates Brain's desire to save everyone, and it seems that since Brain doesn't have a plan of his own, Luxu's going to enact his own actions, because he doesn't want to see Brain's life or his brilliance end here. And this is where things get really interesting, because now we know that the player and Luxu cross paths, and this makes me think back to the secret reports in terms of what happened at the end, or what's currently occurring at the end of Kingdom Hearts Union Cross, right? So focusing on Secret Report 11 and 12, we can see, Luxu's task, what his role was, but also what he was observing on his journey. So in Secret Report 11, Luxu points out that he must bequeath the Master's Keyblade onto another, and that 5 Union leaders have been chosen from the surviving dandelions. So we know that to be Ephemer, Skuld, Lorium, and then Strelitzia. And then, of course, people have played if it's Ven or Brain. And I think, honestly, it's supposed to be Ven, as I said before, that Ven was chosen by the Master of Masters, but Ava switched him out with Brain, which, again, is explained further in this report, in which Luxu states that one of the 5 is an imposter, someone the Master did not choose, and they represent a virus in a program he so carefully wrote. And so, as we've seen through Kingdom Hearts Union Cross, that Brain, this virus, has had this reckless plot, as we can see definitely in this cutscene, as he's trying to reason with him, like, do you have a plan? Right? So yes, that's that reckless plot to allow the 5 to escape into another world line. Surely such a thing can't be possible. We're talking about the same trick that allowed dandelions to transfer to other world lines after the Keyblade War. So we know that's how they ended up in the data world, right? But these children are no masters. So that's, again, another important line that it will come into play later. That these children are no masters. They don't have the title of Keyblade Masters at this point. They're just Union leaders. They haven't had the means, unless, of course, a certain Lady of Magic summoned from the future knows more than I do. And, of course, we see that Lady of Magic, Maleficent, is meddling in with the darkness and kind of interacting and setting things into motion. And, of course, she's going to be the person in the future that's going to remember these characters, because she was brought here to and interacted with them, especially Lorium, right? So the main thing I wanted to point out for Secret Report 11 is that Luxu is a traitor, because he is the one who bears the sigil. He literally has the X, the key, in his name. And he's a traitor because he gave the Keyblade to the imposter as Virus Brain instead of one of the chosen Union leaders. So, of course, again, he's the only one he came in contact with, so I would guess he bequeathed the Keyblade to Brain. Moving on to Report 12 now, we see that the main thing I wanted to point out here is that Luxu said, amid the chaos, I bequeathed my Keyblade to one of the Union leaders, aka probably Brain, and that he watched as the 5 were sent to another world line at no small cost, ensuring the line of Keyblade wielders will live on. And now, specifically, he says, Keybladeless, I must depart this land and fulfill my final task. This means casting my own body aside and soldering my heart in vessel after vessel as many times as it takes. And so, the main thing I wanted to point out here is that he didn't start moving from body to body until after he bequeathed the gazing eye to one of the Union leaders, and that he moved about Keybladeless. So again, this is something to keep in mind in terms of what's going on in this situation. We know that Luxu was tasked with protecting the black box, but it would seem that he lost track of it at some point as he looks for it in Kingdom Hearts 3. And of course, some other topics I wanted to point out involving Luxu is that he essentially is the cause of 2 Keyblade Wars. He sat by idly as the other foretellers fought over who was the traitor among them, and Luxu was the real traitor, not Ava. He also seems to have, and it's honestly set up all these events by, doing the thing by sending the Keyblade down the line into a master rose up that will choose the darkness and start another Keyblade War. So then he's directly involved in our current Keyblade War situation. And so it seems like even though the Master of Masters had this whole entire plan and sending Luxu out on this task to make sure the Book of Prophecies is written and not much things are changed, it would seem Luxu has his own agenda and that he's starting to change a lot of things. And finally, one last line I'd like to mention in this is that at the end he said the Lost Masters will awaken, and specifically using the word awaken, which suggests that they are in slumber and that they may have also passed their hearts on to new hearts via this birth by sleep concept that we see with the player passing his heart to Xehanort, and that eventually the class in the opening of Kingdom Hearts at the final Keyblade War woke them up, and then these 5 out of 7 lights or hearts were reborn, so that's how Lost Masters returned, although again we still don't know where Ava is. So keeping this information in mind, I will start to go into some of the theories that are out there. One theory that, of course, crossed a lot of people's minds initially is that Brain becomes a vessel for Luxu. And so what the main thought is that Brain was sent to Scala at Caelum using the last pawn in the data world, therefore he lost his body, and Luxu used as a vessel as Brain's heart was sent to the future and reformed using Ephemer's memory since he was the first master, and that his hat specifically became that medium which someone can remember him and bring him back type of thing. Also, it seemed that maybe this forced Luxu to cast away his old form in order to save Brain, or maybe even just to continue living in general. Of course, he needs to watch where the Keyblade goes. This would explain the shared face. However, like I said from the secret reports, he said he was Keybladeless when he started to move his heart from different vessels. So in this, in the previous cutscenes we see between Luxu and Darkness talking and eventually going to fight each other, he still has the Keyblade with him, so he has to keep it up until the point that he meets Brain. So unless some other different bequeathing situation happened, which I don't really see that occurring in terms of maybe getting to Ephemer or Strelitzia, it still wouldn't explain why Brain and Luxu has a Keyblade, though. If this person is Luxu or Brain or whatever, what's occurring in the Keyblade graveyard, in which he still has the Keyblade in the box. And another thought, that if the pod in the Daybreak Town stayed there, then it makes sense that Luxu had to join with Brain to escape to using a portal or a corridor, something like that the masters know how to use in order to get to safety. So yes, there's still holes in this theory. I think it was just an initial theory that a lot of people thought about in terms of trying to explain why they have the same face. Another theory out there, this is something that came to my mind actually at first, is that honestly forgetting about that cutscene from Kingdom Hearts back cover, which is the main reason why I'm still not feeling this theory either. And so, but what it is that, again, Brain was the only Union leader Luxu encountered amidst the chaos. So the person that I thought we were seeing is that it's an older Brain who was giving the gazing eye, and Luxu and Braig was looking, as we know that Luxu and Braig was looking for the black box. Again, he got separated from it at some point and maybe left both to Brain, right? And so when Brain was sent to Scala at Caelum, using the pod or not using the pod, don't know, he the Keyblade in the box, I guess, was left for him at headquarters. Maybe that's why they're going that way. In the cutscene, Brain is wearing the black robe because he's still fighting the darkness or warding it off. And he's working to become the next master for future Keyblade wielders. I believe that Luxu was probably lurking close by, keeping an eye on the Keyblade, of course, and this may be in the form of Sigurd. As it said in the report that he had to depart this world, and the world he departed was Daybreak Town, and he had to leave it for Scala at Caelum. He had to leave to the future. Now the gazing eye ends up in the classroom, Scala at Caelum, and then Xehanort will inherit it, and we know that Ephemer was left the Keyblade that Brain had, and this ends up being Eraqus' Keyblade. Now my main reasoning for this theory was that knowing Brain read the Book of Prophecies extensively, Luxu probably entrusted him with the tools, knowing he would try to go against what was preordained, as Luxu was not given a copy of the Book of Prophecies, and he was told not to interfere, which is quite the opposite of what he's doing. Like, Luxu is definitely interfering, even though he doesn't have a book, but now we know that Brain has a book, so he's using his knowledge of the Book of Prophecies and kind of, nudging him in a certain direction for a certain outcome Luxu is trying to accomplish. But again, with this theory, it has holes in it. It doesn't hold up as well because, again, this scene of Luxu revealing his face is picked up right where the scene from Kingdom Hearts Chi back cover ended off, and that character seems to be Luxu without a doubt. So of course I had to rethink what was going on in this situation, take a step back and look at other cutscenes, essentially all cutscenes that involve Luxu, and especially any conversations he has with the Master of Masters. And the one scene that stuck out to me that really helped me develop my theory in terms of what's going on with Brain and Luxu is the cutscene from Kingdom Hearts Chi back cover. What stuck out to me in this cutscene is that the Master of Masters did not give Luxu the Book of Prophecies specifically because he did not want him causing any temporal paradoxes. Now, what temporal paradoxes are is that it's a situation of people time traveling and either changing events, going back in the past to change an event in the future, or going back in the past to change something that will ultimately lead to the future that was already kind of predestined or pre-called for. So it's, again, all this time traveling, not like craziness, and trying to understand, like, okay, what point in this paradox are we at? And so that's actually what I think the direction is going with this face reveal of Luxu looking like Brain. Now, I think there was two major categories. One was a causal loop, and then the other one was the main example being a grandfather paradox. And there's also subcategories of these paradoxes. So a causal loop is explained by when someone travels back into the past to change something, but that will cause the event in the future. Sometimes what they were trying to prevent, or sometimes what they're trying to work towards. That's what it seems to be, the main reasons for that person to time travel, or I guess main outcomes of this causal loop type of thing. You also have this thing called grandfather paradox, in which you go back into the past and create an event to prevent. You go back in the past and change something to prevent something from occurring. So the main example is that a grandfather, has his kid, and he has his kid, so the grandson will time travel, kill the grandfather, so he was never even born. But since he was never even born, he wasn't able to go back and time travel to kill the grandfather, so essentially the man still lives. So you kind of get this weird, this weird loop. So this is kind of examples of temporal paradoxes. You also have predestined paradox, and again, which kind of falls along the lines of the time traveler goes back in time to try to prevent some event in the past, but ends up helping to cause the same event. And then you have self-fulfilling prophecy, in which the outcome is already preordained, and the person is trying everything they can to avoid it, but actually causes the said event to occur. So they're two kind of similar situations that are going on. So keeping these temporal paradoxes in mind, the temporal paradox I think that is occurring with Luxu and Brain is that Luxu is saving himself from an ill fate to preserve light for the future. So this theory that I'm coming up with definitely comes from, again, conversations Luxu is having with the Master of Masters, and also conversation that Luxu had with Darkness. In this scene specifically with his conversation with Darkness, Darkness says to Luxu, "Weren't you told not to interfere?" And Luxu replies, "Yes, with the dandelions, but I'm not doing this for them, I'm doing this for me." He's trying to do what he needs to do to get to the future that he wants, which is essentially, I guess, is bringing back the Lost Masters at this point, right? So going into my theory, this is what I think is what's going on. So the person that we see here with the Keyblade in the box, yes, it's Luxu, but I think it's at a point before the end of Daybreak Town, when the Master of Masters literally told him that when the time is right, go off and do your thing, after he watched the events unfold between the others. So I'm thinking this is maybe directly after the cutscene at the end of the Keyblade War, in which Luxu is watching everything with a gazing eye from a hilltop, and that maybe he even traveled and had his own little mini adventure between that event and during the time of whatever was going on in the data world with the union leaders. So with that said, that this is Luxu's original face. His original face is Brain's face. They share the same face because they are the same person. So Brain and Luxu, they were supposed to perish, but Luxu chose to interfere and save himself by sending himself to Scala and Caelum. So this is why Luxu and Brain are interacting at this point, and Brain is asking him, "Do you have a plan?" And Luxu is asking Brain if he has a plan, and obviously Brain does not. So this is the point at which Luxu realizes, like, oh yeah, I messed up back then. This is where I was supposed to die, but I don't want my brilliance to die. It needs to be preserved for the future so we can get this favorable outcome where light will prevail and darkness will perish. So again, this is causing that temporal paradox that the Master of Masters was saying he didn't want him to cause, but of course, Luxu was doing everything the opposite of what the Master of Masters was telling him not to do, essentially. I also wonder that maybe Brain was exposed to that darkness that Luxu was fighting, and that gave him a form and was able to send it back to Scala at Caelum that way, because that seems to be the main goal again with these conversations. Luxu is saying that we need to give darkness a form. We need to be able to defeat it. So, again, I think I touched on my last video too. I just think that that Luxu is on a mission of just giving the darkness form, and will eventually be the one that will physically place all these darknesses, or create this situation where the darkness and these union leaders cross, and that will take care of that 5 darkness situation. If one is still free at the end, one's not, then we'll have to wait and see what happens with that. I also wonder, though, that if the Brain that we're seeing is that his data version that was put into the black box, and that would, symbolize him being a virus, that he was this data version of himself he put into the data Daybreak Town. He imposed him as being a union leader so he can essentially rewrite everything that's going to occur. So that's also an idea I had as well. And of course, once he gets the situation set up, then he would have to cast his form aside to survive, and also stick close to the Keyblade to see that it's passed down. Maybe his first form that he took was Sigurd, and that, again, Brain will receive the Gazing Eye Keyblade in Scala at Caelum. One other thing I like to point out, I don't know if it's because of the angle of the room or whatever, but one thing I did notice is that Luxu looks taller than Brain, and this may be proof that he was able to save himself as he is older than his current state as Brain in the situation. So it's kind of like that thing that the Master is saying, like, oh, the Book of Prophecies is written, you completed your task, you passed down the Keyblade, I was able to see what was going on and write it, good job type of thing. So maybe that's kind of a hint at that situation. Another main idea that I had is that the Lost Masters know what Luxu looked like. So maybe Ava knew what he was doing, and this is why she chose Brain to specifically be the imposter, Union leader, and Dandelion, and gave him the Book of Prophecies instead of giving it to Strelitzia. Because originally I was thinking, okay, she gave the Book of Prophecies to Brain because Strelitzia was going to be slain. But maybe she gave him the Book of Prophecies knowing that Luxu never got the Book of Prophecies, and he's trying to develop this Brain into the Luxu that he needs him to be. That the Masters didn't want him to be, but this is what happened now. And so, to conclude this, another major point I want to make, segueing into the next section of this video, is that this whole temporal paradox could explain how Master Eraqus is descended from the very first masters in the Age of Fairy Tales, and that Eraqus is the grandson of Luxu Braig, and that he was needed, and his birth was needed so he can train Terra, Aqua and Ven, and for that to carry over to Sora, Riku, and Kairi, and giving us those 6 lights, while Yensid did his own thing with Mickey, and I gave the 7th light. So before I get into the grandparents' lineage theory, I'm actually going to stop this video here because this went a lot longer than I thought it would. It always does. So I'm actually going to split up this whole discussion about this finale into 3 videos. In the next video, I will address the whole cutscene with Xehanort and his mother and what could be going on with the lineage, or what's occurring in Scala at Caelum. That video should be much shorter, quick and sweet to end off everything, kind of, bring everything together in terms of what I've been digging through, and so many different games, so many different platforms, so much information, but I'm working through it. If you like this video, like, subscribe, share, and also if you have other theories about what could be going on with Luxu and Brain, I would love to hear. Also, if you think this theory is pretty well thought out, pretty solid maybe, or it could be a mixture of any of these 3 theories I presented, or maybe even something completely different that I missed, I would love to hear your thoughts. But I will catch you in the next video. Take care.
Master Eraqus, you see, is so afraid of darkness that he too has succumbed. Not to darkness, but to light. It shines so bright, he forgets that light begets darkness. And Aqua and Ven, their lights shine too bright. It is only natural that they cast shadows on your heart. Eraqus is such a fool. Light and darkness, they are a balance, one that must always be maintained. Terra, you are the one who shows the true mark of mastery, but he refuses to see it. And I know why. It is because he fears you. Join me. You and I can do the world's much greater good by wielding light and darkness in equal shares.
Master Xehanort.